Good morning. I'm Keith Davenport with the Johnson County Public Information Office, and I am here at the Johnson County Museum this morning. Last Thursday, the Board of County Commissioners made a proclamation that April is Fair Housing Month in recognition of the 50-year anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. And so today, I'm here with Ann from the museum to talk a little bit about some of the history in Johnson County leading up to the Fair Housing Act. So let's start off with a word that comes up a lot in conversations around fair housing. What is redlining? That's a word we hear a lot. What is that?
Redlining has been the practice of instituted by the Federal Housing Administration to designate neighborhoods with minorities, low-income families, and denying loans in those areas. So if you look at this redlining map from 1939, it's from the National Archives collection. The areas in red, this is Jackson County, Missouri. These are the areas where bank loans were denied. For those of you who are local, Fairyland Park is right here. And if you swing over here toward the left, the state line, Johnson County, you'll notice the county's not that populated at this time in 1939, although Mission Hills has been established. You see that area here in green. And if you look down at the legend, the green were those neighborhoods that were all white areas. The B neighborhoods are in blue. They had reached their peak, but they were still desirable places to live. C were the third grade neighborhoods, and they had expiring or no deed restrictions. And then the fourth D was where you see the redlining. This was, of course, outlawed by the Supreme Court, but the practice still ensued for many years after 1968. It was used as a barrier for minorities and low-income people to move into certain neighborhoods.
Okay, so here in Johnson County then, there are some people who were working to try and end that even before the Fair Housing Act was enacted. Can you tell me a little bit about some of those folks?
Yeah, let's walk over here and we'll talk about, first about Donald Sowing and his wife Virginia. They moved into the Fairway neighborhood in 1966. They were one of the first African American families to do so. And his plan was to integrate neighborhoods. He called it the scatter approach. So he would show homes to families, African American families or other minorities, and he would place them throughout neighborhoods instead of just congregating them in one place. And therefore hoping to dispel the fear that having families from all racial or ethnic groups, that you were creating ghettos and such. So that was his practice in Fairway and in parts of Overland Park, Kansas. His office was in the Fairway area.
So he did a lot of his work through his profession.
Through his profession, through as a realtor, yes.
Very good. Who else do we have?
We have Reverend Robert Minelli, or Dr. Bob, as he is called by his congregation. Dr. Bob came from Pennsylvania in 1947 to start the Village Presbyterian Church. The church actually started in 1949 with about 280 members. And almost immediately as the suburbs grew around the church, he was in the northeast part of Johnson County near 66th and Mission Road, he started advocating for civil rights in general, but also for fair housing. And he was a very vocal person about the housing situation in Kansas City and Johnson County. He gave two sermons, one in 65 and one in 66, to his congregation, asking them to pray and to take into action to accepting people of other races and minorities into their neighborhood. And so what happened was the response was kind of twofold. He received lots of letters of support for his sermon. He also received lots of hate mail, which has been donated to the museum over the years by Dr. Bob. So people who supported what he said and people who were against what he said. And it's interesting, the people who were against, of course, didn't sign their names. So a lot of hate mail sent to him. When you come to the museum, you can actually listen to the letters, and you can also listen to the sermon. We had him come record the sermon last year for this interactive. So he is still with us, and he is still advocating for for civil rights and fair housing
Wow.
in the country.
That's really great. There's one more, right?
There's one more. This is one of my favorite stories. This is Ruth Schechter. Here we see on the wall. Ruth and her family, her husband and 4 children, were Jewish, and they lived in the Fairway neighborhood. And Ruth was an advocate of fair housing, especially in the Olathe neighborhood during the urban renewal process that was going on throughout the country. Urban renewal was a way to go back and revitalize some of the cities and the downtowns that had fallen into disrepair. And in Olathe, the plan was twofold. It was to kind of revamp the Olathe downtown, but there was also a neighborhood adjacent to the downtown, the Fairview neighborhood, which was the African American neighborhood that had actually been there since after the Civil War. And one of the challenges with urban renewal and building new housing in the Fairview neighborhood was a lot of the families living there who were living in homes that didn't have water in some cases, or electrical. The streets weren't paved, or there were no streets, there were no curbs, was to upgrade the housing. The rub was some of them couldn't afford the new housing that was built for them. So Ruth and Joe Pearson, who we see here with his family, formed a nonprofit where they bought substandard housing, made the minor necessary repairs, and then sold them back to the owners at very, very low interest rates.
Wow,
so they could actually stay in their home in the neighborhood. And so in this case, the urban renewal in many neighborhoods, it broke up these traditional African American neighborhoods, while at the same time they were trying to improve their housing situation. It broke up the neighborhood.
Yeah. So their nonprofit, they would try and get community support. So like financially, the community as a whole would pool their resources to make some of those
happen. Because the urban renewal, the federal funds were limited, and by the time they got to the neighborhood, they didn't have enough money to. They were going to revitalize or tear down 300 homes and build new ones, and now that the money was running out, that was limited to about 50 homes. So Ruth and her organization went in and tried to, as I said, make the needed repairs, and then the owners got low interest rates, and they were able to stay in their neighborhood.
Wow.
And that was her intention, and Joe Pearson's intention as well. This is the copier, the machine that Ruth had in her basement in Fairway. The story is, through Ruth's oral history with the museum, that she and her 4 children cranked out newsletters for the Kansas Advisory Council on Civil Rights. She was also part of the Shawnee Mission Fair Housing Group, and this is where she produced all her mailings and flyers that then she would send out to the members of those organizations and to politicians.
Wow.
And so she donated this to the museum.
Wow, that's great. So you have a lot more displays and information here about this topic, but also about other topics in the museum.
Right.
If someone wants to come and check those out, what are the hours? How do they get here?
The museum is open Monday through Saturday, 9 to 4:30, and we give public tours at 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. every day, so you can get some more in-depth stories.
Yeah.
And we have the 1950s all-electric house as part of that. It's probably our biggest artifact in the exhibit. And our story starts early on with the Native Americans and takes folks up today, focusing on the themes of land, people, and our relationship with Kansas City.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much, Ann, for helping us learn that today. Thanks for joining us this morning, and come down and check out the museum.